My name is Elizabeth, and at 28 years old, my parents left me hungry and alone at 13. When my uncle died, they demanded millions, but the lawyer's secret clause left them with nothing. My parents abandoned me when I was a child, and the only person who stood up was my uncle. Years later, I'd established my own life and business, and I thought I was done with them. It turns out they had different intentions. Let's just say that things got messy. People assume that when parents abandon their child, it will result in a dramatic conflict or a screaming match. For me, it was just another frigid Tuesday morning, and I awoke to an empty apartment and a note on the counter. If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, let me know where you are watching from. My life had appeared to be normal up until that point. Dad had a modest used vehicle lot a few blocks away. If you've ever drove past one of those businesses with the inflatable tube man flying around, that was essentially his empire. He pretended to be a business tycoon, yet half of his time was spent gambling in casinos rather than selling vehicles. Mom maintained a daycare from her apartment. She kept it going for a time, but after her depression worsened, parents stopped bringing their children. When a babysitter cancels 3 days in a row, word spreads quickly. At first, we appeared to be a normal family. We had Friday movie evenings with microwave popcorn, camping vacations in this worn-out tent that leaked when it rained, and cinnamon buns on Christmas morning. Nothing flashy, but it was ours. Then cracks started appearing. I'd overhear them arguing late at night. Dad would arrive home later and later, always smelling of old smoke and grease rather than dealership floor polish. Mom spent more time in bed, blinds closed. When I asked about groceries, she told me to make do with cereal or whatever crumbs we had. Dad agreed to turn it over every week. Promises were his preferred currency, as they were inexpensive and simple to spend. I tried to stay consistent, kept my grades up, cleaned the place without being asked, and didn't complain about wearing the same shoes till the soles were nearly worn through. I assumed if I was perfect enough, they'd notice and pull it together. But kids don't fix grown-ups, as I discovered the hard way. I woke up late on the day everything fell apart. Nobody shook me for school. The apartment was really quiet. Too quiet. Their bedroom door was wide open, which was unusual because Mom always shut it on bad days. I looked inside, and half the closet was empty. Drawers were emptied out, leaving socks and other miscellaneous items behind. On the kitchen counter, there was a note written by Mom. "Elizabeth, we can't do this anymore. Your Uncle Graham will take care of you. We apologize." 16 words. That was it. I dialed Mom's cell phone, and it went straight to voicemail. I tried Dad's number, already disconnected. I scoured the premises for contact information, an address book, or whatever. Nothing. It's just me, the note, and stillness. That night, I stayed up on the couch, staring at the phone as if it owed me a response. On day 2, the landlord turned up, hammering on the door about rent. I explained that my parents were gone, but he glanced at me as if he knew better, muttered something about contacting social services. That's when terror struck. On day 3, I gave up and called my school counselor. She did not waste time. The next thing I know, Child Protective Services came knocking. Mr. Barrett, the social worker, spoke in a calm way, as if he was trying to keep me from breaking. He called, shuffled documents, and claimed they had found my father's brother, Uncle Graham. Uncle Graham had become somewhat of a ghost name in my family. I'd seen him maybe twice. My parents always referred to him as chilly, stuck up, and too obsessed with his luxury house design business. He resided in another state, never married, and had no children. But guess what? He was the only individual who answered the phone when CPS contacted. When Graham strolled in the next morning, it was as if a whole new planet had entered our bleak apartment. Black vehicle in front, smart suit, silver cufflinks, and slicked back hair. He looked more at home in a boardroom than in my kitchen. He inspected the area, groaned, and said, "Pack what you can carry. The rest can be shipped later." No hugs or sugarcoating, just down to business. And that's how my childhood ended. Quiet, untidy, and accompanied by a stranger who turned out to be the only adult in attendance. Graham did not waste time. While the CPS representative was filling out papers, he stood in the midst of our cramped living room as if he were conducting an inventory check. He didn't seem sad. He did not appear shocked. He just seemed deficient. "1 suitcase," he reminded me. "Not 2. We're not hauling junk." I recall gazing at my belongings, the pictures on my wall, my video games, and felt a mixture of panic and rage. But I did not argue. Something about the way he said it made it plain there was no space for compromise. I shoved all I could into a faded blue suitcase, clothes, a few books, and a photograph of me and my mother at the park. I left everything else behind. CPS will handle it, Graham stated. On the way to his house, he scarcely spoke. Every now and then, he would look in the rearview mirror and inquire if I was hungry or needed to use the restroom. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, perhaps comforting words. Instead, it felt as if I had been drafted into a military program. Orders only, no small talk. When we arrived at his place 3 hours later, I knew house wasn't the correct term. It was a full-blown Victorian home, the kind you'd see in a historical magazine. Tall iron fence, groomed grounds, and stone statues I couldn't identify. I stepped out of the car, still wearing the same hoodie I'd been wearing for days, and felt as if I had arrived on another planet. Graham went in after me, gave the place a quick inspection, and said, "Don't touch the curtains with dirty hands. Breakfast is at 7 a.m., that's all." He then left me standing there. That night, I did not cry. I was too wired. Everything felt fleeting, as if I messed up. He'd contact CPS and send me somewhere else. I stayed awake, staring at the carved ceiling, promising myself that I'd follow his instructions until I found out an escape road in case I needed one. The rules came quickly. Shoes off in the house, homework done at a desk rather than on the couch, and 1 hour of piano practice every day. It didn't matter that I had no talent. I broke practically everyone within the first month. Not on purpose half of the time, but simply because I wasn't used to structure. When I walked into the kitchen at 8, the stove was cold and he was reading the paper. "Kitchen closes at 7:30, he'd remark, not looking up. No yelling or guilt trips, just penalties. That was the thing about Graham. He did not operate on emotions. He acted more like a boss than an uncle. If my schoolwork wasn't completed, my weekend plans were canceled. If I did not follow through, I would lose my privileges. He never threatened to get rid of me. However, that was the difference. Every punishment had an endpoint, and once it was finished, life returned to normal. The first break in his steel wall appeared around 2 weeks in. I was in my room, staring at an old photo of my parents' wedding day. I didn't hear him enter. He noticed me trying to wipe my tears discreetly. Instead of making a speech, he simply offered me a handkerchief, perched on the edge of the bed, and remained there until I gathered myself together. There was no advice or pity, only presence. Strangely, that was superior to any "I'm sorry" statement. Graham's life revolved around systems. Whitaker Home Collections wasn't just a furniture store. He'd established an entire chain of luxury decor businesses spanning 3 states. He approached everything like business, including me. On weekends, he would drag me to meetings. "Watch how they talk," he'd say quietly. "See who speaks first, who gives in, and who maintains eye contact." I was 14 years old and taught negotiation skills before I could even complete algebra. But don't get me wrong, he was strict as hell. I was grounded for not polished my shoes before school. He once made me redo an essay 3 times because I wrote cool instead of effective. And if I rolled my eyes, he'd raise an eyebrow and remark, "Be careful, Elizabeth. The world will not bend just because you're irritated." But there was something solid beneath the sarcasm. Unlike my parents, he did not disappear when things became difficult. That first year, I challenged him 100 times, skipping piano, sneaking TV on weeknights, and hoping he wouldn't cast me away like my parents had. He never did. He punished me, but he stayed. And I gradually realized that this was not a one-time occurrence. Looking back, the first year with Graham laid the groundwork for everything that happened after. At the time, all I knew was that I'd gone from being abandoned as a child in a run-down apartment to living in a mansion with a snarky, rule-obsessed uncle who somehow convinced me that I wasn't disposable. Even though I wouldn't accept it at the time, a part of me began to wonder if this wasn't such a bad deal. Graham was not the type to let you go. He checked my public school grades and basically stated, "This won't cut it." Before I knew it, I was enrolled at Westfield Academy. The school was tough. The classes were more challenging than anything I'd ever seen. Kids were talking about summer vacations to Europe while I was still figuring out which fork to use at supper thanks to Graham's incessant table etiquette drills. I felt like I was drowning throughout my first semester. I'd spent hours at my desk eating through textbooks and still barely get by. Graham's reply was not sympathetic. One night, I came to dinner virtually in tears because of geometry proofs. He laid down his fork, gave me that look like I was wasting oxygen, and continued. Your circumstances change for no reason of your own, but your response is entirely up to you. Use the chance or waste it. I don't invest in lost causes. This irritated me, but it also hit home. He was not going to give me sympathy points. If I wanted to fit in at that school, I had to work hard, which I did. I used the allowance he granted me to hire a peer tutor. I created study groups. By junior year, I had clawed my way into the honor roll. Graham noticed. He didn't say, "Good job," or clap me on the back. He simply put a new leather briefcase on my bed one morning, saying, "You'll need this." That was his version of pride. At home, punishment was not optional. I used to believe he was merely controlling, but then I learned it was for training. He wanted me to be bright, organized, and ready to work at his level. It irritated me at first, but I eventually realized that those behaviors offered me an advantage. Teachers at school would comment on how well prepared I was. Classmates wondered how I always had notes ready. Graham refused to accept mediocrity. The true conflict arose during college applications. I planned to attend State University. A group of my Westfield friends were going there, and honestly, all I wanted was something familiar. Graham was not having it. He strolled into my room one night, dropped a stack of Ivy League and top-tier school brochures, and said, "Apply to these." I lost it. "Why should you worry where I go? State is a fantastic school. It's my life, not your project." He remained composed. "Of course, your friends are thinking about social lives. I'm thinking about your future. You have potential. Don't waste it hiding in your comfort zone." That continued to alarm me. I never asked to be your project. Maybe I just want to be normal for once. His response was chilly and sharp. "And I never asked to be your guardian. Yet here we are. I'm giving you opportunities your parents never had. You're welcome." That gave me a headache, not because he was incorrect, but because it was the first time he acknowledged the obvious. Neither of us had requested this arrangement, but we were stuck with it. And in his own way, he was attempting to provide me with an opportunity that my parents would never have given me. Later that night, he finally opened up, which he nearly never did. He informed me that my father was a talented mathematician who was unable to attend college due to financial constraints, that he worked at a gas station while Graham received the scholarship. "He resented me for many years," Graham remarked. "Your mother was also smart, but her prospects dried up. I will not let that happen to you." Hearing that altered everything. It did not warm him up, but it did explain why he pushed so hard. For him, this was about more than simply me. It was about breaking the cycle. I ended up applying to 7 schools just to prove that I was not intimidated. I had 5 options and chose Northwestern, a good blend of prominence and distance. When the acceptance letter arrived, Graham did not smile or cheer. He merely handed me a pen and said, "Sign it, tuition's covered." There was no drama or sentiment, just action. I couldn't deny it, no matter how much I wanted to protest. His approach was working. By the time I prepared for college, I had changed from the kid who strolled into his mansion with only one suitcase. I was sharper, more confident, and perhaps more like him than I cared to acknowledge. College was the first time I felt like I had room to breathe. Northwestern wasn't easy, but compared to Graham's house, it was manageable. I knew how to get up early, manage my time effectively, and work harder than anyone else. While some kids were missing lessons because they partied too late, I arrived with a briefcase in hand, already 5 steps ahead. I joined clubs, challenged myself with group projects, and discovered that I had a talent for design and marketing strategy. Graham's observe everything lessons paid off. I could read a room, figure out who was lying, and utilize silence to coerce individuals into filling holes. It made presentations feel more like negotiations, which instructors observed. Graham didn't soften much while I was gone, but the distance altered our relationship. Calls grew less formal. He would occasionally crack a snarky joke. When I complained about the dining hall cuisine, he remarked, "Good. Consider it training for the real world, where everything tastes bland if you're doing it right." I worked at Whitaker Home Collections every summer. Graham didn't only assign me easy jobs. He moved me between departments as if he were testing me. Inventory one summer, vendor negotiations the next, followed by marketing. By the time I graduated, I knew the company inside and out. After graduation, I relocated back to the mansion, this time not as a misplaced child, but as the company's new marketing director. We had a routine, an uncle and his niece sharing a home. Occasionally we ate together, and occasionally we just passed each other with nods. It was pleasant, strict, but pleasant. Over the next 6 years, I worked my way up. First as an assistant marketing director, then as head of the entire function. We launched 2 new shop formats, updated vendor relationships, and established a profitable e-commerce engine. By then, I was 27 years old. Then everything shifted. Graham sat me down one night, abnormally silent, and mentioned the word leukemia. No buildup, no soothing tone, simply the facts. It's advanced. The prognosis isn't good. Treatments will buy time, not fix it. This hit me like a truck. But Graham was not searching for sympathy. He handled it like any other business problem. We all die, he explained. The only variables are when and how we use the time before. After that, our roles switched. I took on the responsibility of keeping him on track. Medications, doctor visits, ensuring he ate. Graham would roll his eyes whenever I reminded him, but he never fought me. He knew I was running things his way, which was direct and rigorous. At work, he progressively handed me the reins. First lesser projects, then complete decision-making. He did not hover. If I made a mistake, he would sarcastically point it out before letting me rectify it. Employees who had previously looked at me as the kid began coming to me first once Graham made it obvious that I was not a placeholder. I was the future. The disease stripped some of his armor. Not entirely. Even though he was hooked up to IVs, he continued to throw out snarky lines. But in calmer moments, he revealed a side I hadn't seen. When I helped him into bed one night, he gripped my wrist with surprising strength and murmured, "You were the daughter I never allowed myself to have." That was Graham's way of delivering a sentimental nuke. I wasn't sure what to say. I only nodded, since speaking would have been false. 8 months later, he was gone. He slept peacefully. The funeral was not large. Mostly business associates, a few distant relatives, and staff that admired him. I stood at the graveyard, understanding that the guy my parents had always characterized as cold and arrogant was the only one who turned up, the only one who had genuinely built me into someone capable of standing on her own. The mansion seemed empty, without his scathing remarks booming through the halls. I'd find myself saving things that I thought he'd enjoy or mentally planning how I'd tell him about a new technique before realizing he wasn't there anymore. But whether I was in mourning or not, I did not neglect my business. If Graham taught me one thing, it was that action matters more than words. So I honored him by keeping Whitaker Home Collections strong and running business the way he taught me, sharp, disciplined, and with no half effort. This was my life for 3 weeks. Business, solitude, the heaviness of an empty house. Then the lawyer's letter arrived. A will reading was scheduled. I assumed it would be me, some business partners, and maybe a charity or two. I had no idea my parents were about to come back into my life. Weeks passed before I received a call from Caldwell, Graham's attorney. His voice sounded calm and prepared, as if he'd delivered this speech 100 times. "Elizabeth, it's time we read Graham's will. I'll need you downtown next Friday." I responded, "Sure," before hanging up. I didn't think much about it until Friday came. I strolled into the marble lobby and spotted 2 people I hadn't seen in 15 years. They were not invited. They had interrupted Graham's obituary reading, made enough noise in the foyer that Caldwell allowed them to sit so he could record their lack of standing. My parents. They walked in as if they belonged there. My mother donned a blazer that screamed outlet store business chic, with pearls swinging like she was auditioning for rich grandmother. My father wore a too-tight navy suit, his jaw clenched as if he were about to close a deal. Their gaze fixed on me and froze. "Elizabeth," my mother gasped. "Look at you, honey." Dad gave a curt nod. "You've grown." "Yeah. Tends to happen when you feed a kid instead of tossing her outside with a trash bag," I replied. The secretary blinked awkwardly and took us to Caldwell's conference room. A long table, legal documents neatly piled, and Caldwell at the head in his clean suit, adjusting his spectacles as if preparing to defuse a bomb. He cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming. We're here to read Graham Whitaker's last will and testament." My mother raised her hand as if she were in school. "Before you start, we're Elizabeth's parents. Graham may have stepped in, but obviously family has rights." I smirked. "Yeah, you remember that 15 years ago, or just today?" Caldwell disregarded the jab and opened the folder. He read steadily, without fluff. "Graham Whitaker leaves the following to his legal ward: Elizabeth Grant, primary residence valued at $1.8 million, cash savings of $2 million, and 70% ownership of Whitaker Home Collections valued at approximately $45 million. The words hung in the air like smoke. I reclined back with arms folded. My parents sat transfixed, blinking as if their minds had short-circuited. Finally, my mother said, That's everything." Caldwell nodded. "Correct. Graham's instructions are clear. The estate passes entirely to Elizabeth." My father sprang forward in his chair. "This is outrageous. Graham manipulated her. We should at least be co-managers. Elizabeth is young. She needs guidance." I laughed. "Guidance? You two couldn't guide me to a bus stop." Caldwell raised his hands. "I understand emotions are high, but Mr. Whitaker's wishes are explicit. If you'd like to contest, you may. I'll warn you, this document is airtight." Mom leaned in, false tears beginning to shimmer. "We're not contesting. We just want to help. Elizabeth, honey, you know paperwork like this is confusing. You shouldn't have to handle all this pressure alone. Let us manage it for you, just until you're settled." I stared at her. "You kicked me out at 13. I think I can manage a house deed without your supervision." Dad tightened his jaw and muttered, "Ungrateful." Caldwell, obviously bored of the theatrics, stacked the papers. "We'll reconvene later this week to finalize signatures. For today, let's adjourn." And just like that, the meeting ended. My parents followed me out of the building, almost rushing to keep up. "Elizabeth, wait," Mom said. "Can we talk? Just dinner, maybe, please." Normally, I would have told them to shove it, but curiosity, and perhaps a sick sense of humor, had me nodding. "Fine. One dinner. Tonight." We met in a mid-range Italian restaurant near my home. When I arrived, they were already seated, menus untouched, and faces rehearsed. Mom started softly. "We made mistakes. We know that. But you have to understand, your father had problems back then. Gambling issues. It ruined our finances. And me? Well, I was dealing with depression. We weren't ourselves. I mixed my drink with a straw." "You don't say. I thought kicking your kid out was just a new parenting trend." They giggled uneasily, then exchanged glances. And just like that, the sympathy act failed. Dad leaned in. "We need help, Elizabeth. Things haven't been easy. We're in debt. Your mom's medical bills alone." Mom cut him off, voice low and urgent. "If you could spare 100,000 just to get us stable again." I laughed so loudly the waiter glanced over. 100 grand? That's your opener? Not even a warm-up, just straight to 6 figures. Dad's cheeks turned red. "You have millions now. Don't act like this is difficult." I reclined back, arms wide, and enjoyed the performance. "Correction, I have millions. You have pasta you haven't ordered yet." Mom's voice became sharper. "We're your parents. We deserve consideration." I shrugged. "You deserved consideration 15 years ago. You didn't want it then." Silence extended. The waiter eventually arrived to take orders. Awkward as hell. I chose lasagna because I knew they couldn't afford more than excuses. Dinner ended quickly. They made another appeal for money. I told them to get jobs. Dad said something about ungrateful children destroying family legacies. Mom wiped her eyes with a tissue as if she were auditioning for pity. I walked out feeling lighter. Not because I saw them again, but because I was certain nothing had changed. Same entitlement, same games. The only difference this time was that I had the upper hand, and watching them squirm for a handout was more valuable than the inheritance itself. A week later, I was back in Caldwell's office. This time, it was not just me and him. My parents had brought in their own counsel, a man in a wrinkled gray suit who appeared to have gotten lost on his way to traffic court. They strutted in behind him like royalty, shoulders back, smirks painted on their faces as if this was their victory lap. "Ready to correct this little misunderstanding?" my father asked, dropping his briefcase on the table as if he were preparing to buy the building. "Misunderstanding?" I inquired. "Yeah, must have slipped Graham's mind when he raised me for 15 years and you didn't." Mom flashed me a phony smile. "Elizabeth, honey, we're not here to fight you. We just don't want you to drown in responsibilities you don't understand. A company worth millions, properties, assets. This isn't a toy box." I slumped back in my chair. "You're right, it's not. That's why Graham actually trained me for this stuff while you were too busy pretending I didn't exist." Caldwell cleared his throat, then handed a binder across the table. "Before this meeting continues, there are a few clarifications we need to put on record." Their attorney puffed up. "We're prepared to challenge the will. These parents were clearly cut out unfairly. This girl," he pointed at me as if I weren't in the room, "was manipulated." I grinned. Love when I get downgraded too. "This girl makes me feel like a gladiator about to crush someone." Caldwell didn't even blink. He opened the binder and began spreading everything out, page by page. First, Elizabeth was not just Graham's ward. At 16, Graham legally adopted her. "Here are the documents, signed, sealed, and approved by the court." The lawyer's pen froze in midair. My mother's mouth fell open. "What?" she hissed. "That's impossible." Caldwell moved the papers closer. "Not impossible. Legal fact. Which means, by law, Mr. and Mrs. Grant, you have no standing in this estate." Dad's cheeks got bright red. "We are her biological parents." I shrugged. "Congrats. Biology makes you donors, not parents." Caldwell persisted, calm as ever. "Second, Mr. Whitaker anticipated this. He hired private investigators. We have reports documenting repeated attempts you both made over the years to extort money from him, including phone records, bank transfers, even emails." He made a tapping noise. "It's all here, every attempt to squeeze him dry, and now, after his death, here you are again." Their lawyer shuffled papers as if he wanted to hide beneath the table. Caldwell was not done. "Third, Mr. Whitaker left a personal letter. I'll read it now." He opened a page, cleared his throat, and started. "Elizabeth, if they've shown up, I told you they would. They won't change. They'll circle back when they smell money. Don't let them take what you've earned. If they try, this letter is your shield. Remember, family isn't who brings you into the world. It's who shows up when the world walks out." The room was silent. Caldwell then dropped the last hammer. "And lastly, the nuclear clause. If anyone contests this will, all assets, house, savings, company stake, automatically transfer to charity, specifically the Children's Cancer Foundation. To be clear, only parties with legal standing can trigger that clause. Outsiders can't. And Mr. and Mrs. Grant have no standing." I couldn't help it. I began laughing. "So go ahead, sue me. The only thing you'll win is a donation drive." My mother slammed her hand on the table. "This is theft. You can't steal our daughter and our inheritance." "Funny," I said, leaning closer. "Because last time I checked, you already threw your daughter out. Now you're just mad someone better took your spot." Dad snarled. "You'll regret this." I leaned back, relaxed as always. "No, I won't. But you might regret not investing in a mirror." That irritated Mom. "You little brat. After everything we gave you." "Like what?" I interrupted. "The night you dumped me on a sidewalk, or the years of silence after? Real Hallmark stuff." They tried to shout over me and use every guilt trip in the book. "We are your true family. You'll understand what loyalty entails when you're older. Graham brainwashed you." But it was pathetic. They sounded like children whining after being caught stealing cookies. The lawyer attempted to pull them back, but they were too far gone. Mom gestured at me as if she were conjuring lightning. "You think you're so clever, but you're still just a child. You'll fall apart without us." I smirked. "I've been falling apart without you my whole life." Guess what? I'm still standing." Caldwell waved, and 2 building security guards entered. "That will be all. Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Grant out." The look on their faces as security took a step forward was priceless. They began protesting, claiming they had a right to be there and demanding to speak to someone higher up. But Caldwell simply closed his binder and announced, "Meeting is over." Watching my parents being marched out of that glass tower, screaming and writhing as everyone in the lobby stared, that was the kind of satisfaction money couldn't buy. Their screams of betrayal, loyalty, and blood echoed through the marble hall. But everyone else saw them for what they were, two entitled lunatics. Security took my parents out of Caldwell's office as if they were shoplifters refusing to admit they were caught. But I knew it wasn't over. People like them don't absorb no. They interpret it as, "Try again, louder." I didn't wait. I drove immediately to the courthouse to file for a temporary restraining order. The judge signed it that afternoon. That night, a process server handed them the documents, and I emailed the case number to the police to ensure it was on file. I expected at least a week before the next stunt, but they didn't even give me 48 hours. The driveway camera showed their rental car creeping in after dark, headlights dimmed as if they thought stealth mode came free with the rental. My mother was dressed like she was going to church, and my father looked like he was preparing to sell something door to door. Both walked up my driveway as if the place already belonged to them. The doorbell rang, once, twice, then continuously. They leaned on it as though pressure would erase the restraining order. I opened the door just enough to block the entryway. "Restraining order's still active," I said evenly. "You can't be here." Mom smiled with that phony kindness she reserved for people she wanted something from. "We just want 5 minutes." "Great," I said. "Take it outside the gate. You've got 4.5 left." Naturally, they shoved past me as if I were a doormat instead of the homeowner. Dad scanned every inch of the foyer, eyes darting like a scavenger, appraising furniture for resale. Mom trailed her fingers along the banister as if she were already imagining where to put her vases. "This place," she said, her voice syrupy and insincere, "it was meant for family." "It is," I replied. "Just not the kind that abandons their kid and comes back 20 years later with a handout." That cracked her smile, even if just for a second. Then Dad stepped in. "Drop the attitude. Without us, you'd still be nothing. You owe us." I tilted my head toward the corner where the red light blinked. "Say it louder for the camera. Judges love this kind of material." His face turned crimson. Mom shifted to the guilt trip playbook. She started talking about how hard it was to raise children, how much they sacrificed, how ungrateful I was. Dad puffed his chest, lifted his chin, and barked about respect and family legacy, as though yelling could rewrite history. It was like watching the world's worst improv duo, two people competing to sound the most delusional. I didn't budge. I leaned against the wall, arms folded, letting them finish their little performance. When the script ran out, I gestured toward the door. "Time's up. Walk out or the cops escort you." Dad smirked. "Call them. We'll tell them our daughter locked her own parents out of their home." "Perfect," I said, already dialing. "Make sure you spell trespassing right on the report." The police arrived faster than I expected. They already knew the situation. The restraining order was on file. The officers were polite, but their eyes told me they'd seen this act before. After a brief exchange, one officer turned to my parents. "You have 60 seconds to leave, or you'll be detained." Mom tried one last pity plea, voice quivering, hand clutching her chest like an actress mid-monologue. Dad muttered something about misunderstandings and manipulation. It didn't matter. They were escorted back to their rental car and drove off, smaller than I'd ever seen them. For the first time, I saw them clearly, not as villains or parents, just two hollow people still blaming everyone else for the holes they dug themselves into. The house felt different after they left, not heavy, free. It was the first time in years I could walk through the halls without expecting someone to knock or demand something. The mansion was quiet, but it wasn't lonely anymore. It felt earned. I didn't waste time. The next morning, I met with the operations and finance teams at Whitaker Home Collections. We tore into the company exactly as Graham would have wanted, sharp, efficient, no room for slack. We axed underperforming products, revamped the online store, and replaced outdated shipping systems that had been eating profits. Within 2 months, online sales doubled. The retail locations began to recover too. No more unsold stock collecting dust in the back rooms. By the end of the quarter, we'd launched 2 new locations, the same ones Graham had circled in his notes years ago. Only now, they weren't just dreams. They were working, thriving branches of something real. The staff noticed. At first, they looked at me like the lucky niece who'd inherited her uncle's empire. But when problems started getting solved before they exploded, when payroll came early instead of late, when I showed up in person instead of hiding behind office doors, they started to see me as something else. Not a stand-in, not a placeholder, a leader. That's how you earn respect, not with words, but with results. At home, I kept digging through Graham's things. There was one box I hadn't touched, a wooden chest he'd kept sealed. Inside were ledgers, sketches, correspondence, and a neat stack of envelopes labeled by year. His version of breadcrumbs. The newest envelope was marked, "When you are ready." Inside was a single sheet of paper, his handwriting, sharp, deliberate, unmistakable. Trust yourself, do not wait for permission. Build it better than I did. Short, blunt, completely Graham. I still have the cameras rolling. Maybe my parents will try again someday. Maybe they won't. Entitlement doesn't die. It just hides until it thinks you're tired. But I'm not tired. Every time I drive past the lot where a new store is breaking ground, every time I see a balance sheet glowing black instead of red, every time I lock up the house knowing it's truly mine, it feels like another nail in the coffin of everything they tried to take. They got their chance when I was a child. They threw it away. Graham picked up the pieces and turned them into something. Now it's my turn to make it thrive. That's what keeps me moving forward. The last time I saw my parents was on a blurry security video. They drove past the gate slowly, windows down, eyes fixed on the house like tourists staring through museum glass. They didn't stop, didn't ring, just looked, knowing this was as close as they'd ever get again. I didn't wave. I didn't even step outside. I just let the camera record them shrinking smaller and smaller until the car vanished beyond the fence line. Graham once told me, "Some people grow when they lose power. Others shrink. Your parents, they'll shrink. You'd better grow." I hadn't understood it then. Now, standing in my office, watching employees laugh in the hall, glancing at construction plans for new stores, I finally did. I had grown, and for the first time, I knew he'd be proud.